Great. Well, I think I'm going to shift gears a little bit, I guess, to editorialize. I think RDA is perhaps the intersection between the kind of internet and culture we've heard and hopefully the science culture that many, not all of us, have come out of. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about CODATA, which I'm pinch hitting for our president, Wadong Lo, who couldn't be here. I had been the Secretary General for 8 years. CODATA is another body of the International Council for Science, just like Mustafa's organization, which he'll tell you about. CODATA actually has its own separate organization, started in 1966. So we've passed our 45th anniversary. A few years back, we kind of simplified our mission, and in some sense, I think it reads parallel to what RDA is aiming for. But we again came out of a more traditional science community, but we've been trying to evolve with the explosion and the recognition of data as a key part of science. So I'll just give you a really quick overview. We are a membership-based organization. We originated with members in the International Scientific Unions of ICSU and national members of traditionally science academies. That's been evolving. Other sister organizations, that's what's meant by co-opted organizations, some supporting organizations that, institutes and centers and companies that we've worked with. And we've recently been trying to expand because we never had individual members, so we didn't have that kind of individual participation except through institutions, which I think was one of the limitations, but also part of the original business model. So one of the ways in which CODATA operates is actually through grassroots working groups and task groups. And so we have our own process for generating groups. They often are teams of scientists. They don't have to be from member organizations or unions. We had one group approach us interested in anthropometric data, and the problem was they came from the military, they came from companies, they came from academia. They had no umbrella under which to work internationally. So they actually came to CODATA and said, can you help us be this neutral party where we can share data even though, we're military or commercial. We usually had no tradition for sharing data. So we have lots of topics currently. These change every couple of years. And there's some that certainly overlap with RDA interests, but some that are really very science-focused. We have a specific problem in a discipline or new interdisciplinary area. And we do, CODATA actually funds these to an extent, and I think one of my points is that some funding is important because they're groups in a voluntary situation, like from developing countries that just have no resources to participate at the level that developed countries can. So if you don't support them, you get an automatic bias in who can play. That may be changing with the internet, but I mean, developing country scientists, I work in the developing world a lot, and internet connectivity and stuff is not something you can take for granted, as most of us do. We have an open access online journal. We run conferences, which are important for the community. We also give prizes. Paul, you is one of our prize winners. Mike Goodchild just got the prize last fall in Taipei. Our next conference is in New Delhi in 2014. Actually, some years ago, ICSU and others started criticizing CODATA because all we did was grassroots working task groups. And they said, you guys weren't being strategic enough. There are big strategic data issues out there that somebody needs to work on. And so one of our response, in addition to the requisite strategic plan writing, was to really start focusing on strategic issues. So when the World Summit on the Information Society came along, there were two big international conferences, and everybody was mostly arguing about internet governance, one of the big agendas that was not well represented was, gee, didn't science help start the information society? Isn't there an important role for talking about data and information and the digital divide in the larger political context of the World Summit? So CODATA played a role. We were, we wrote 2 editorials that appeared in Science and had people at the big international meetings and side meetings and events and all that kind of fun stuff. More recently, we've been working with the group on Earth observations, helping them to move from general principles about open access to actual implemented changes in how the space agencies and others in GEA, in the group on Earth observations, actually share data, and not make all data conform perfectly with full and open access, but an important subset. And how do you provide the motivation and the tools to actually get people to tag data, to start using open licenses and so forth, and promote interoperability for at least an important subset of data. One of our task groups, which has been around a long time, I think has one of the highest impact factors you can have, which is that every 5 years they change the fundamental physical constants of the universe, which you probably thought were constant, but actually change. Now the irony is there's a proposal to make the empirical constants, 7 of them, declared under the international system of units. So that's like a revolution, because you go from empirical constants to defined constants, and then you no longer change, they really become constants. Anyway, our task group is one of the key players and formally recognized in the international system of weights and measures. So that's one of the roles we've had for, I think, 40 or 50 years. And then we do other things. There's a policy statement on digital divide issues that we did with another ICSU body and so forth. Recently, a group of stakeholders in the nanomaterial community came to us, and we helped ICSU organize a whole set of a workshop and some follow-on activities. And there, nanomaterials, you think of, well, that's just a small scale. It turns out, within a few orders of magnitude of things that are considered nano, there's actually quite different communities who work on these issues but haven't worked across their little subscales. And so that's kind of an interesting area. And, in the sense of trying to have an influence on global data policy, we've been very active in all sorts of things that Peter Fox mentioned earlier, the Planet Under Pressure Conference, some of the Rio Plus 20 side meetings, the group on Earth observation, a whole set of international activities related to disaster research. And we get into hands-on training and other kinds of activities to kind of reach out to the community in the developing world. So just to kind of sum up, I think our areas where we've seen some potential for collaboration, obviously Paul Euler and I and others have been here proposing the idea of a working group on, or I guess interest group now, on legal interoperability, stemming partly from the work we've done with GEO and other communities. I think there's discussion on how to link up the existing CODATA ICSD task group on data citation, which has actually been working for a couple of years and has some reports due out fairly soon, and linking that with some initiatives coming out of the World Data System and interest at RDA. I think there's areas, we have a new strategic plan that partly responds to what ICSU's strategic priorities are, things like the Future Earth program. And we have kind of a draft out that is looking ahead at where we can be effective in, for example, building on the OECD principles and guidelines on access to publicly funded research data, and in other areas mentioned there and I don't have time to go into. And so, I still would argue there's a high-level need. I mean, CODATA and many other organizations really could help raise the profile of science data in the larger global policy field. It's a field that clearly needs constant defense from budget pressures, from politics, from all sorts of areas where there tends to be, whether it's budget or political agendas trying to affect how science and how the internet operates as well. We're, for example, looking at the constant issue that scientists, when they do these big international programs, a few people who are veterans of the International Polar Year can testify that scientists themselves are really bad at managing their own data, setting up data infrastructure that has persistence, and really doing all the things that they say they wanted to do in terms of leaving a legacy of scientific data information for future research and doing education and all this other good things. So there's a lot of work out there, and we would be speaking on informally on behalf of CODATA. We would be like to work with RDA on some of those issues. Just so you know, there's a stack of, we just had a newsletter which describes the current 12 task groups. It gives you pictures of the people, readers involved, and there's a two-pager on CODATA, and we happened to commission a 45-year history, so you can look at our mistakes over the last 45 years and hopefully learn from them. But those are up on the back. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. A couple questions. Any questions for Bob? Peter?
Yeah, thanks. So Bob, it's very interesting, and it seems to me, I'm not so well informed yet, so that you are, as you said, more on the strategic level, while I see RDA more at the base level, so coming up with concrete issues. And my question is, would you also see these complementarity, and would you see that CODATA could be a platform where good things, good outcomes, good results of RDA could be, presented or disseminated, things like this?
Well, I think our tradition has been, we've tried to have both grassroots and strategic efforts, and that they are complementary. And, we don't pretend that our little 8, 10, 12 task groups can possibly cover all the interesting data science activities that any group could come up with. So I don't think we have any problem with working with another group that wants to proliferate additional working groups. Especially ones that really, more than ours, are intersections between the IT and computer science and informatics communities, more than some of ours. A few of ours are obviously very technical data, but many of them are much more focused on the interdisciplinary integration and so forth. So, yeah, I think that's complementary. Our power to get out to, I noticed the tweet that our RDA was referenced in the Wall Street Journal blog. Every organization has their channels into different communities and ability to influence, certain kinds of groups. I think we have some, Ray Harris coined the term in-reach into the scientific community through the unions. Our ability to, go out to policymakers like any other organization is partly serendipity, specific people, partly, the different kinds of modes where we've worked historically.